Hi, and this one's a doozy. I don't mean to fearmonger, but this video is going to be scary, I think, for a lot of people. And what I don't want to have happen is I don't want the information that I'm about to show you to create more hesitance to come forward and speak the truth and be powerful. Because that is exactly what has to happen right now before it's too late. Okay, what I'm going to show you today is the framework that's being built in the background of the Canadian healthcare, in quotes, establishment, in order, I believe, for them to be able to classify political dissent as being a mental illness. And it's actually a little darker than that, because it isn't even political dissent so much as it is dissent from pharma. It's pharma dissent. And, well, I'm going to try to go over it briefly, but I want to show you some other things that are happening also in the way, and a little bit of history as to what went down in the Soviet Union when they used something called sluggish schizophrenia it was a bogus diagnosis, but they used it to send people away and to remove all their civil rights, to prevent them from getting jobs and this sort of thing. It was condemned by the WHO and the entire global population as being an extreme abuse of the medical system, particularly the mental health system. But the same thing is being put in place in Canada, I believe, and I'm going to show you the evidence starting right now. All right. The first thing is from the College of Physicians and Surgeons, Ontario, and it is a guidance paper put out online to doctors. And there's a section in this guidance paper that says pandemic-related practice issues. And they have a question here to begin it. It says, patients are asking me to write notes supporting a medical exemption from COVID-19 vaccines. What do I need to know? I've just taken an excerpt here. It's longer than this. But they talk about how there's so few exemptions from COVID-19 vaccines. The only one is that you've had a bad allergic reaction to one of the COVID-19 vaccines. And I covered this in another video, so I'm not going to go over it. But how do you like that? The only way to get an exemption from this vaccine is if you have a bad reaction to the vaccine. And in their more in-depth policy paper about this, they say you should still recommend that the patient get another brand of the COVID-19 vaccine. All right. So really, right off the bat, there's no way for you to get a medical exemption from this thing, according to the guidelines of the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Ontario. But the part I really want you to look at today is this part down at the bottom. It is also important that physicians work with their patients to manage anxieties related to the vaccine and not enable avoidance behavior. For example, for extreme fear of needles or other cases of serious concern, responsible use of prescription medications and/or referral to psychotherapy may be available options. Overall, physicians have a responsibility to allow their patients to be properly informed about vaccines and not have those anxieties empowered by an exemption. This went a little bit viral on Canadian Twitter. And it is starting to be covered in the international media. But of course, the Canadian mainstream media, who functions as a propaganda arm for the state and for the medical industrial complex, they are not covering this. And what's so bad about it? Well, I hope it's obvious on its face. No, you really shouldn't give your patients exemptions. And if you give your patients an exemption, it's just going to empower anxiety. The better course of action is to give them psychiatric drugs or make them a referral to a psychiatrist. Okay, so that's phase one. And then you look at the Canadian Psychiatric Association's recent training, which they called Delusions, Unusual Beliefs, and Conspiracy Theories. Has the boundary shifted? This was put out October 29th, but I'm not positive of the year. Further down on that page, it says, at the end of this session, participants will be able to, 1, have a better understanding of how certain political movements have challenged the diagnosis of delusions. Stop right there. You see where this is going. Political movements have challenged the diagnosis of delusions. What does that say to you right there? That people who don't go along with the political ideologies of the day might be suffering from delusions. All right, I carry on reading. 2, have an improved awareness of the extent of bizarre ideation present in certain segments of the population. And 3, appreciate the need to distinguish delusions from certain bizarre, mass-held belief systems. Now, bizarre is not just a word this writer chose to make his point. Bizarre is a category of delusions. If you look here in this paper on delusional disorder, updated July 2022, they give a list of the most frequently encountered types of delusions. I'll just read the first 2. 1, delusional jealousy, that one's sexual partner is unfaithful. And 2, bizarre, a delusion involving a phenomenon that is impossible, not understandable, and unrelated to normal life. And you can see the other ones down here. So you have a typical delusion that someone is obsessed with the fact that their partner might be cheating on them. Well, first of all, as a non-psychiatrist, I have to say, how are you sure the person's partner isn't cheating on them anyway? But the danger here for this moment in history is this second category, bizarre. And that's what the Canadian Psychiatric Association is probably referring to in their training session here, bizarre. Further in this Canadian Psychiatric Association document, it says, in the case, for example, of delusional disorder, preserved function and a relative absence of other psychiatric symptoms can make the diagnostic process particularly challenging. The widespread dissemination and acceptance of poorly supported ideas and beliefs has been accelerated in recent years by social media outlets. This has resulted in a plethora of unusual, at times bizarre beliefs or conspiracy theories being widely held within the general population. In this workshop, the process of assessing and diagnosing people with delusional ideation will be reviewed, with particular emphasis on the diagnosis of delusional disorder. Some of the limitations of the current DSM approach to the diagnosis of these disorders will be reviewed. Okay, again, we're back to political. This idea that a lot of people can believe false things because of social media, that automatically, because they're on social media, they're false. And they get to categorize certain things as conspiracy theories here. And what is particularly troubling is that they are saying they have problem with the current DSM approach to the diagnosis. So, they have these tools to diagnose people, which are their Bible, the psychiatrist's Bible. But suddenly they have a group of people who don't fit that diagnosis. They can't find any diagnosis that they fit. So they're just going to update the diagnosis. Maybe. If a whole bunch of psychiatrists come together and try to tell them, your diagnosis doesn't work, let's change it to include this group of people, maybe they will. Maybe they already have, because it has been recently updated. So you see the pattern. You're hesitant about a vaccine. Well, maybe you're delusional, because it's impossible that public health would lie to us. I can't understand why you would question it. And this is unrelated to normie life. Change that to normie life. Right. And then, so your doctor is advised not to give you an exemption, but to consider you possibly mentally ill. And then they'll give you more pills. Ding, ding, ding. Pharma wins either way. So yeah, with the new diagnosis of delusion, who knows where this will end up. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm just not going to take the pill. Fine, let them diagnose me with delusion. They can give me the prescription. I'll even go fill it, but I just won't take it. Unless, of course, these type of compliance tracking tablets might come into play. Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, was talking about this at a recent World Economic Forum meeting. Listen.
It is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance. The insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take, they do take them. It is fascinating what happens in this field.
So they know whether or not you've taken your pills. And even if they don't have this high-tech solution in place, there's a doctor called Thomas Binder in Switzerland. He's a cardiologist, and he came out really early on speaking to COVID-19, and he was going against the narrative. They busted down his door on Easter weekend 2 years ago, and they put him in a psychiatric facility, and they made him take pills, and they monitor his compliance. They do testing on him regularly.
Because I did nothing wrong. They realized this after 1 hour. There was no threat of anybody. And I was not armed, and I had no psychiatric history, of course. All these allegations of these labeler were wrong. And so they couldn't arrest me. So obviously they tried something else, and they didn't know how to deal with me. So they put me into closed psychiatry. But then they gave me the opportunity to decide. Either you stay here in the psychiatric hospital for 6 weeks to have treated this mania, or you can leave and go home and continue to work, but you must take a medication. And I was forced to take a neuroleptic, and whether I took it or not was weekly controlled by a blood check. So these are really Soviet-style, GDR-style psychiatric methods.
This is outrageous. So this is Switzerland. For everybody listening right now, I want you to all know that this is happening in Switzerland, and you were forced to take a psychiatric medication because you spoke out against COVID-19 restrictions and measures. Am I right?
Yes. But of course, these, as I said, the corona insane other side decided I must be corona insane. So from their point of view, this was of course correct. But from my point of view, this was completely wrong.
This is very dark stuff, and I'm sorry if it's scary. I want to look at history now about that sluggish schizophrenia diagnosis that they made up in the Soviet Union. This is an article from Medical News Today, going over the facts. A Soviet psychiatrist named Andrei Snezhnevsky developed the diagnostic criteria for sluggish schizophrenia in the 1960s. Psychiatrists and doctors in the USSR and some other Eastern Bloc countries used it until 1989, when the fall of communism began. Many experts believe that Snezhnevsky developed the sluggish schizophrenia concept due to requests from the Communist Party. The theory was that anyone who opposed the Soviet regime was mentally ill, because there was no other reason for their behavior. Further diagnosing individuals with sluggish schizophrenia became a tool for handling political dissent. Individuals involved in the publication or distribution of anti-state literature or political activism were targets. Psychiatrists would incarcerate these individuals in mental institutions without any medical justification. Under Soviet law of the time, these people could be isolated in maximum security hospitals or in prison camps. Sluggish schizophrenia was discredited because it had no scientific basis and was a fictional diagnosis. It was one of the infamous diagnoses that Soviet psychiatrists used against political nonconformists. Once they discharged them from the hospital, they would lose their civil rights and be unable to find employment. Using diagnoses in this manner was a form of systemic political abuse of psychiatry and has been internationally condemned. And a little more on sluggish schizophrenia from Wikipedia. They had to have a carefully crafted description of sluggish schizophrenia that established that psychotic symptoms were non-essential for the diagnosis. According to Snezhnevsky, patients with sluggish schizophrenia could present as seemingly sane, but manifest minimal and clinically relevant personality changes which could remain unnoticed by the untrained eye. Isn't that handy, right? Only our super special qualified experts can tell that you have sluggish schizophrenia. Patients with non-psychotic mental disorders or who were not mentally ill could be diagnosed with sluggish schizophrenia. This is exactly what I just showed you from the Canadian Psychiatric Association. It's exactly the same. Along with paranoia, sluggish schizophrenia was the diagnosis most frequently used for the psychiatric incarceration of dissenters. Daryl Regier of the National Institute of Mental Health, one of the U.S. experts who visited Soviet psychiatric hospitals in 1989, testified that a substantial number of political dissenters had been recognized as mentally sick on the basis of such symptoms as anti-Soviet thoughts or delusions of reformism. Well, anti-Soviet thoughts are now anti-vaccine thoughts because it's not a political regime, not an outwardly political regime that people are dissenting from. It's a pharma regime, pharmaceutical regime. Anti-vaccine thoughts, perhaps. And I just want to point out that American psychiatrist Peter Breggin, who is very vocal right now against everything that's happening with COVID-19 and public health in general. He points out that the term sluggish schizophrenia was created to justify involuntary treatment of political dissidents with drugs normally used for psychiatric patients. What I just showed you at the beginning, I just don't think it's a far stretch to say that this same exact thing could happen here. And how do we know if it's not already happening here? We wouldn't hear about it. How would we hear about it? These patients would be scooted off or drugged. And who are they going to tell? Let's say they called all the newspapers, all the media outlets, all the MPs. Who is going to disagree? Who is going to bring their case forward? Probably nobody. And now I just want to make one more fine point about the word bizarre delusions. In this same paper about how to recognize delusional disorder, it says bizarre delusions more likely correlate with schizophrenia. So I'm sorry, it's scary. It really had me freaked out and scared yesterday. Honestly, it did. And now I'm presenting it today, but it still scares me. You remember this? I did a video a ways back called Are Leaders Being Threatened by the International Public Health Mafia? And in this video, I showed two clips. This is the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and this is the former Premier of Manitoba, Brian Pallister. And they both said completely bizarre things. Brian Pallister, when a caller asked him about ivermectin, he looked terrified, and then he just rambled about the drug industry in Manitoba and then thanked people for making it rain. It was really, really weird. But the more to the point thing I'd like to show you, I'm going to play this, is when Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, was answering a question from the reporter about when will political leaders take charge? They seem to be deferring everything to public health. And here is what part of what Doug Ford said.
You keep saying that you've got to get the green light from doctors, but where does the leadership of a politician come in, whether it's dealing with Dr. Williams or telling someone like Dr. Davila, who quite frankly I think would keep us locked down for months to come? At what point do you, as the person in charge, the elected official, say, you know what, I understand your position, I've heard your concerns, yep, but there's other evidence and there are needs out there that go beyond just dealing with COVID?
Sure. Could I go out there and be the only politician in the entire country, including the Prime Minister, all premiers, every single mayor, because I've talked to the vast majority of them, and say, okay, docs, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm going to disagree with you. When I said I'm going to follow their direction on health advice right from day one. And then if I did that, they could slap a Section 22 down, and it's just friction. You know, I'm going to stick with what I've done right from the beginning. I'm going to stick with health and science and work with them collaboratively. But I'm going to be very frank. There's no politician in this country who's going to disagree with their chief medical officer. They just aren't going to do it. They might as well throw a rope around their neck and jump off a bridge. They're done. I'm telling you the facts. It's very simple.
You're done, he said. You might as well throw yourself off a bridge. There's not one single politician, he said, who will stand up to public health and question them. Gee. Could it be because of what I've just described? I mean, it might be. And then this just popped up today. Thank you to KZA65 at Karen Cawthorn1 on Twitter. She posted this study about why people are having blood clots and heart attacks all of a sudden. Listen to what they say here. This brief review will offer data that may demonstrate that misinformation perpetuated by the anti-vaccination movement may be causing more deaths and side effects from any vaccine. A mini review of published literature has been conducted and found that mental stress clearly causes vasoconstriction and arterial constriction of the blood vessels. Therefore, if subjects are panicked, concerned, stressed, or scared of the vaccination, their arteries will constrict and become smaller in and around the time of receiving the vaccine. This biological mechanism, the constriction of veins, blah, 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 is the most likely cause for where there has been blood clots, strokes, heart attacks, dizziness, fainting, blurred vision, loss of smell and taste that may have been experienced shortly after vaccine administration. The extreme mental stress of the patient could most likely be attributed to the fear-mongering and scare tactics used by various anti-vaccine groups. Wow, they are layering it on. Anything but the vaccine, right? I mean, okay, according to this study then, people with anxiety about getting a vaccine should definitely not take it because they're way more likely to get all of the things listed in that paper. But that's not how they're using it. They're using it to say anti-vax talking points, any concerns raised about the vaccine are going to kill people because they're going to make them scared. You know, it is true that terror and stress cause health problems in people. It's true. So why did they do 24/7 fear-mongering for a year and a half, 2 years about COVID? Why did they do that? They knew this. Everybody knows this. So, you know, I agree that the fear that's being generated from both sides is causing illness. I really believe that's true. But on the other hand, what are you supposed to do? Just do, don't worry, be happy about everything? That would be delusional. So it's a mess. All right, couple more things. I want to point out that Canada's new euthanasia laws carry upsetting Nazi-era echoes, warns expert. And this was in Forbes, but it's taken from a longer piece, a very long piece actually, that the Associated Press did in August. Canadian media lied their faces off to reassure the public that the things said in this article are not happening, but they are happening. I covered it it might have been 2018. I did a video about it, and I featured this man, Roger Foley. And what was happening there was they were sending euthanasia. We call it MAID here. MAID, medical assistance in death or in dying. They were sending salespeople into patients' rooms, patients that had long-term issues. And wait till you hear the slimy sales pitch. It's so disgusting. There is a longer version of this recording in my original video, and I'll link to that down below the video in references. But I'm going to just play you the short end. And I don't think you will be able to believe how slimy this process really is. Okay, here you go.
How are you feeling, Raj? Are you feeling like you want to harm yourself or anything like that?
Well, like, I'm always thinking I want to end my life because of the way things are going. Like, if I had self-directed funding, then I'd be fine,
But if you weren't, you can just apply to get assisted. If you want to end your life, like, you know what I mean? You don't have to do it in some dramatic manner. You can apply for assisted, you know.
He can't even say it. He can't even say assisted death. But that's what he's talking about.
Well, they already presented an outcome option to me, but it's like, why force me to end my life when...
Oh, no, hang on here. I'm saying if you feel that way, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm saying I don't want you to be here and wanting to take your life if you're having these thoughts, because you always have these thoughts.
Well, because I'm trapped. It's my intolerable suffering is due to the system creating it. I want out of that system. I need self-directed funding. And
yes, but that's something that you're continuing to fight.
Yeah, I'm fighting for my life.
Yeah. How you doing, Raj? Hey, you thinking about killing yourself today? Everything about our euthanasia system in Canada is concerning on its face. But it gets darker because in March 2023, they're going to extend all of these medical assistance in dying provisions. And one of the things they're extending it to is to the mentally ill. And keep in mind that things like anxiety or depression or delusions are considered mental illnesses. And I know people like to imagine that the patients are in control, but are they? You just heard what happened to Roger, and Roger is mentally strong. That's great. He can resist. But A, should he have to put up with that? And B, what if you're not as mentally strong? What if you are severely depressed? Do you think that smooth salesperson would have a different effect on you? What if you're under age? Because they are considering extending this to what they call mature minors, people under 18, who they think are, oh, this person is very mature. They can make their own medical decisions. And guess what? Parents will be left out. Anyway, I don't want to get distracted by the euthanasia evil that's happening in Canada. But the facts are that they are empowering doctors to consider vaccine hesitancy as a mental illness. And instead of respecting your anxiety, they're going to treat it. They're going to refer you to a psychiatrist, and suddenly you're in this mentally ill basket. What might that mean? Just think about it. And this really reminds me of something I covered a couple of weeks ago, and that's what happened to mega billionaire superstar Kanye West with his personal trainer, Harley Pasternak. The story with Kanye West was he was making them a lot of money, he was productive, he was keeping with the narrative for the most part. Yes, he was a bit wild child here and there, but they brought in a trainer for Kanye at some point named Harley Pasternak, and Harley Pasternak was tasked with keeping Ye in line. Of course, that's not what Ye thought until it all went sideways for him. Harley Pasternak institutionalized Kanye West after one of his concerts when Kanye West was saying things that were politically incorrect. This is what Harley said to Ye recently when Kanye West went off script again. This is a text message he sent to him. I'm going to help you one of a couple ways. First, you and I sit down and have a loving and open conversation, but you don't use cuss words, and everything that is discussed is based in fact and not some crazy stuff that dumb friend of yours told you or you saw in a tweet. Second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you and you go back to Zombieland forever. Playdate with the kids just won't be the same. Does that sound like sluggish schizophrenia? Does that sound like the system that's being put in place with several building blocks in the background of the Canadian medical establishment? It does to me. Here's a future text possible between you and your doctor. The doctor says to you, I'm going to help you one of a couple ways. First, I'm going to stop empowering your vaccine hesitancy by refusing you an exemption. You will not argue back or refer to anything you saw on the internet. Second option, I prescribe you psychiatric drugs to manage your anxiety, and your new psychiatrist monitors your compliance. Non-compliance could lead to you going to a medical facility for a nice long stay. If you don't enjoy your new home, we can offer medically assisted death as an alternative treatment for your bizarre delusion. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just take the vaccine. Just stop talking about adverse events, adverse reactions. Just tape up your mouth, slave, and do what you're told. What we've got being built in Canada right now is a system very, very similar to the Soviet system to crush political dissent. They called it sluggish schizophrenia, and you could be diagnosed with this for having anti-Soviet thoughts. Well, what about if you're hesitant about the vaccine? The entire medical establishment is colluding and conspiring to make that a mental illness. We're not going to call it sluggish schizophrenia. We're going to call it a bizarre delusion. And that's when you have anti-vaccine thoughts, anti-pharma thoughts. And hey, is your life so miserable because you're being monitored? They're making you take these antipsychotic medications or whatever it is, and they're monitoring your compliance with this, so you're always dumbed down, always dulled, always subject to the reactions and toxicity of this medication. Are you miserable with your life being like this? Well, hey, there's always MAID. And guess what? Good luck for you. We've expanded the definition to include mental illness now. I know I'm smiling while I'm saying this, but it is not funny. It is not funny. And if we don't stand up now, we will never recover. Our children will be raised in this system, and they might not even know that there's an alternative. Okay. Sorry, dark, I know. We don't want this. I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks a lot for being here. Please go over to my website, amazingpolly.net. And hey, there's even some happy things on there, inspiring things on there, comforting things on there that I found around the web. Go to the Polly's Picks video section and the Polly's Picks articles section. Also, you can find out how to contact me, send support for this channel. Thank you to everybody who has. You keep me going in many ways. So I send sincere gratitude out to you all. AmazingPolly.net. Don't forget to check in. Thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. Until next time, peace out.